Welcome back to Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. I'm Jamie G, the man with the golden leg, and I'm back with Magnum Mills to help you seize the gap and stop being so inefficient. On this episode, we're going to help your fantasy football team seize the gap with our Week 4 waiver wire recommendations. I don't think that there are a ton of waiver wires this week, but a few of our favorite running backs are finally going to happen, aren't they? I could feel it.
Yeah, I mean, you trying to bait me into talking about Javonte Williams? I mean, or is it Trey Benson, or I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be one of those weeks, man. The injuries come at you frequently and quickly, and we are here to help you deal with that on Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. Thank you for checking out the show. You can find our content wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Find us on social media at Seize the Gap and on the web at seizethegapff.com. Nice and easy to remember, just like the flaps, FLAPS. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please hit the thumb. And you should know when we're talking about ownership percentages, we're generally talking about ESPN fantasy football leagues. They are the most common platform, but the ownership percentages will differ across the different platforms. So just know that that's what we're referencing because a lot of people use it.
We're going to mostly be focusing on recommendations for your typical 12-team PPR leagues. If you're in some sort of different format and you've got a question, just go ahead and leave them in the comments or hit us up on social media. Mills, we've had five backup quarterbacks starting in week 3. That's insane. What does that mean for our quarterback recommendations heading into week 4?
It means you're probably going to have to dig a little bit deep this week. Nobody really jumps out as like a you must go ahead and spend all your fab on him kind of guy. But if I had to pick the highest priority at a quarterback this week, it would be Matthew Stafford. The Rams quarterback's only owned in about 37% of ESPN leagues. His upcoming schedule doesn't sound great on the surface. He's versus the Colts, versus the 49ers, and at Baltimore, but that's actually the best fantasy schedule of any quarterback. So it doesn't always quite match up with the good defenses in terms of what they give up in fantasy points. So right now, Matthew Stafford's looking pretty sweet for these next couple of weeks. So, if you need a quarterback, and especially in a one QB league, you go ahead, probably spend 10-ish% of your fab, lock him down. It feels kind of dirty, but I guess I have to also say if you need a quarterback, you could speculate on Carson Wentz. He could be the starter for the Vikings for the foreseeable future, only owned in about 3% of ESPN leagues. And he's got Justin Jefferson to throw to. Jordan Addison just came back. TJ Hawkinson. Jordan Mason's looking good in running back. So I don't know if I'm doing it in a one quarterback league unless it's a deep one, but it's most definitely if you're in a 2 QB super flex league, Carson Wentz should be on your radar. As far as speculative ads, Jackson Dart, the rookie for the Giants, is going to be under center for the foreseeable future, probably the rest of the season, unless something goes really wrong. Only owned in about 4% of leagues. Gets to throw to Malik Neighbors, look good in the preseason. So if you have room on your bench, go ahead, tuck him on there. You could do the same with Bryce Young. The Carolina quarterback's only owned in about 10% of ESPN leagues and has a very nice upcoming schedule at New England versus Miami and versus Dallas. That is one of the better 3-week schedules. So if you need not just a 1 week streamer, but a multiple week streamer, go ahead, throw 5% of your fab or so at Bryce Young. Same thing for Geno Smith. The Raiders quarterback's only owned in about 10% of league. Gets upcoming matchups versus Chicago and at Indy, which are pretty good for fantasy quarterbacks. And if you need a 1 week streamer, not guaranteed that he will play, but if he does play for Justin Fields again, Tyrod Taylor could be a nice option. Only owned in 1% of leagues, traveling to face the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. Again, that's a little bit of a late game, so it might not be the easiest call to make. You got a bunch of other good streaming options over multiple weeks, but if you just need the 1 week guy and you want to get it for minimal price in a 1 QB league, Tyrod Taylor could be the man for you.
We had some big time running back performances in week 3 to go along with a couple of big time injuries. It's unfortunate, but it's part of the game. Who is actually available on most waiver wires, though, Mills? Because some of these guys, they probably ain't out there.
Not a lot of them are, but if you look, there are a surprising number of guys that are only owned in 85, 80, 75% of leagues. So give you a full-on predator, like just do it now. If somehow Cam Scadaboo only owned in 79% of leagues or Quinshawn Judkins only owned in 70% of leagues is available, go run to get them, blow 60 to 75% of your fab. Do it now. No hesitation, no surrender. John Thundergun style. Priority ad just under that, Trey Benson. He's a little bit over the 50% line, only owned in 55% of leagues. Same kind of thing. I would probably go at least half of your fab. You're going to need at least that to get him, maybe even all the way up to 75%, depending on your need at running back. Very excited about him. And I'd also still call Bashal Tutin a priority ad. The Jaguars running backs only owned in about 58% of leagues. found the end zone for the second week in a row. Looks to be a nice compliment to Travis Etienne, but I expect him to overtake Etienne long term for the job, which might be by the end of the season. And then if you're speculating just a few guys, Brian Robinson Jr. is the handcuff to Christian McCaffrey, only owned in 46% of leagues. He is a locked and loaded RB2 at worst if McCaffrey goes down, and a higher end RB1 at best. So he should be owned in all leagues. Continue to speculate on Kenneth Gainwell, now up to 27% ownership. The Pittsburgh running back found the end zone last week. He is behind Jalen Warren, but is most definitely miles and miles ahead of Caleb Johnson to be the RB2 for the Steelers. Ollie Gordon looked decent for the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. He looks like he's going to be kind of the big back complement to Devin Achane. He got a couple of series for his own, and he would be a high priority target if Achane were to miss time. Blake Corum's a guy we've liked for a while. He has worked his way into the clear handcuff status. Add to Kyron Williams there. He found the end zone recently. He's getting more work each week, so someone to keep an eye on if you've got room to stash him at the back of your bench. Same thing for Woody Marks, the rookie running back for the Texans, only owned in about 9% of ESPN leagues, and he has worked his way up to being the RB2. The only unfortunate thing is he still has to run behind that Texans offensive line, which does nobody any favors, but he could be the starting running back for the Texans sooner than later, so he should be at least on your radar, if not on the back of your bench. And then finally, Brashard Smith, the rookie running back for the Chiefs, seen his role grow a little bit the last 2 weeks, got a lot of juice, good returner, could use him in the receiving game out of the backfield, former wide receiver, only owned in 1% of leagues. So if you're digging deep at wide receiver, he should be out there in literally just about any league.
Yeah, and I don't even know what to say about wide receivers in week three. I mean, just absolutely insanity here. I do know, though, if you started Malik Neighbors and CeeDee Lamb in a PPR league, you got less than 4 points combined. Now, to put that in context, that's less than 10% of the points scored by Trey Tucker. You gotta love fantasy football, right, Mills? I mean, come on.
I don't know if someone out there did it, but if you started Trey Tucker in the Vikings defense, you got more than 70 points from those two players. I definitely had at least one league this week where I only got about 80 points total. So that is just disheartening. I will say same kind of thing. Do it now if they're out there. Jordan Addison, the receiver for the Vikings, coming back for suspension, only owned in 76% of leagues. So if you're in the 24% of leagues where he is available, go ahead, blow that 50 to 75% of your fab on him. Same thing for Chris Godwin, the Bucks wide receiver, is nearing a return, also only owned in 76% of leagues. It looks like Mike Evans is going to miss about a month, so Chris Godwin could step right back into a major role. As far as priority ads, we're once again on Elick Ayomanor here, the rookie wide receiver for the Titans, only owned in 21% of leagues. Calvin Ridley is looking dusty, so Ayomanor could be the wide receiver one there sooner than later. Also, our guy Tyquan Thornton had another good game for the Chiefs, only owned in 2% of leagues. He's doing enough that I think he's going to be startable in the short term, and he might work his way into status as a long-term starter, especially if Xavier Worthy isn't going to get back to full health by the end of the season. And I'm going to keep the faith in Troy Franklin, now up to 49% ownership. Just missed on a deep shot here. Bo Nix has not looked the greatest, but Franklin has really solidified himself as the wide receiver two across from Cortland Sutton, and I like the long-term potential here. So don't let the slow game in week three dissuade you from picking him up if he's still out there. And then if you're speculating, yeah, here's Trey Tucker. He's only owned in 2% of leagues. Max it at 10% of your fab. Know that he's a boomer bust player. Good guy to throw in there if you're deeply down in your matchup and you need some help. But otherwise, I just don't see him being an every week starter. If that happens, so be it. I'll eat my stock or whatever it is. But right now, he pretty much just looks like a deep threat that's going to catch a couple of touchdowns once in a while. But give him credit. Geno Smith is willing to throw it up to him. Similar guy to that, Luther Burden the third for the Bears. The rookie had a monster game, over 100 yards and a touchdown, like his long-term potential. So if you have room, tuck him on the back of your bench. Same thing for Torrey Horton, the rookie wide receiver for the Seahawks. Found the end zone twice, once in the receiving game, once with a 90-yard punt return. Lots of juice there. Wouldn't surprise me to see him overtake Cooper Kupp for the wide receiver two job sooner than later in Seattle. Calvin Austin the third for the Steelers found the end zone again. The game-winning touchdown from Aaron Rodgers, only owned in 11% of leagues. Fine dart throw. Don't think he's an every week starter, but if you need a fill-in guy in any given week, he could get a big play touchdown for you. If you have CeeDee Lamb, you could look to either Keontae Turpin or Jalen Tolbert, owned in 2% and 1% of leads, respectively. I don't think either will be consistent on a day-to-day basis. It will be George Pickens and Jake Ferguson being the primary beneficiaries of the absence of CeeDee Lamb. But if you want to take a shot, that Dallas offense should be forced to put the ball in the air a lot, given that that defense looks kind of like doo-doo. And the Packers will be without Jaden Reed for a while here. Romeo Dubs is only owned in about 34% of leagues. Dontavian Wicks only owned in about 4% 44% of leagues. They get that matchup this week against the Cowboys. I don't know which one it will be, but I think you can start either of those guys this week and hope for a semi-decent game. Christian Kirk is out there in a lot of leagues, only owned in 22%. The Texans need somebody else desperately to step up in that passing game. Missed the first 2 weeks, didn't do a lot in week 3, but I could see him having a much more expanded role throughout the season. Sterling Shepard is only owned in 1% of leagues. Depending on the status of Chris Godwin, he could be an excellent streamer this week if Godwin and Evans are both out. Even if Godwin returns, Shepard could be useful for the next couple of weeks while Mike Evans misses time. And then finally, for the Commanders, keep an eye on Terry McLaurin. Could miss some time with a quad here, at least week 4. You'd have to pick probably between rookie Jalen Lane or sophomore Luke McCaffrey. Both look good last week. I slightly prefer Lane, but if you want to take a shot at McCaffrey, I wouldn't blame you. Again, both kind of dart throws. Don't know how much long-term value they have, but if McLaurin's out in week 4, they might be worth it for you.
How bad is the tight end position when it comes to fantasy? Seriously, consider this. The Saints got blown out by 31 points, yet they produced the tight end 9 and tight end 11 for the week. What can we do here, Mills? I mean, when Drew Sample outscores Brock Bowers, I just don't know what can be done. Is the moon made of cheese? Are sixes, sevens now? What is it?
Well, I don't know if the moon is made of cheese, but after enough gallons of wine, it starts to look that way, anyways. Yeah, it can be absolutely just disheartening at time at the position. I will say, do it now if he's somehow out there, and in 29% of ESPN leagues, he is. Dalton Kincaid, he is the tight end 6 now on the season. Surprises me that he's only owned in 71% of ESPN leagues. He could be a long-term solution for you for the rest of the season. So if you were weak at tight end, I could easily spend somewhere between about a third of my fab and maybe 2/3 of my fab on him, depending on your league scoring, even higher if it's tight end premium. As far as priority ads, I still like Isaiah Likely, only owned in 12% of leagues. I think he's going to have a pretty sizable role when he gets back in there, but that still might not be for a week or two. So keep an eye on his injury status. And Hunter Henry had the 2 touchdown game. That's not going to happen every week, but he's available in 51% of ESPN leagues. He's got the best rapport of anybody on that team, probably with Drake May. He will be inconsistent, but he has some real touchdown upside, occasionally get some volume. Tight end position is that ugly. Also, like Chigon, Koku only owned in 15% of leagues, basically because the Titans don't have anybody else. He's a fairly decent athlete. You're not going to get high-end tight end production from him, but he could be a back-end tight end 1 for the remainder of the season, as could Brenton Strange. The sophomore for the Jaguars is only owned in about 21% of leagues. It looks like Diami Brown got a little banged up, and Travis Hunter is playing more on defense. That opens up some options for Strange, and we saw him come through with a nice game in week 3, and I would continue to buy the Browns rookie tight end. Harold Fandon Jr. only owned in about 39% of leagues. I expect his role to grow throughout the season. If you're just speculating, Darren Waller for the Dolphins is supposed to return this week, only owned in 11% of leagues. So if you want to throw 3, 4, 5% of your fab on him, take a shot at him maybe being something. I don't have a problem with that. Same thing for Rondé Gatz in the second. The Chargers rookie tight end did a nice job stepping in for Will Disley in week 2. I'm not sure what his role will be when Disley returns, but he could see his role grow throughout the season. So if you're in a deep league and you could tuck him, you could do so. And then it does look like Jonnu Smith has officially surpassed Pat Freiermuth as the tight end 1 for the Steelers. It kills me, but he's getting more targets. He's getting more work, and he's available in about 60% of ESPN leagues. So if you're going to roll with the Steelers tight end, I guess it should be Jonnu Smith, although I'm not wild about any of them at this point. And then if you're just kind of looking for a streamer this week, don't hate Mason Taylor, only owned in 4% of league. It's a nice matchup at the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. Dalton Schultz is pretty much one of the only guys available for the Texans in the passing game at this point, only owned in 9% of leagues with a decent matchup at home against the Titans in week 4. And then finally, if Colston Loveland is out for the Bears, you could consider streaming Cole Kmet, the Bears tight end, only owned in about 1% of leagues with a matchup in Las Vegas against the Raiders.
Offense is king when it comes to fantasy football, but we feel that the defense and special teams units deserve a place at the table. Mills, who are the top defensive special team streaming options for week 4? And for those of you that didn't watch movies in the 90s, go ahead and explain that reference.
That is from the program, which is not really a good movie, but it is a very fun movie with actually a very, very stacked cast. When you go back to watch it, it's nothing special, but if you grew up with it, it was a very classic 90s sports movie. Shout out Joe Kane. Jamie G, shout out your guys, the Buffalo Bills. They are only available in 23% of leagues, but 67% is too low for a team that gets to face the New Orleans Saints at home this week. They are probably the number 1 DSD on the board. So if they're somehow out there in your league, go ahead and do that. They also have a nice upcoming schedule, so this could be more than a 1-week stream. Somehow the Los Angeles Chargers defense is only owned in 13% of leagues. I guess maybe it has to do with the matchups they played. That is absolutely wild, but they have an awesome matchup against Jackson Dart, the rookie quarterback, getting his first start this week. So they're out there in most leagues. They will be a very, very popular streamer. And then finally, the Detroit Lions are only owned in about 56% of leagues. So fudging the percentage just a touch here to throw them in, but they get a nice matchup at home versus the Browns. And you know you can turn Joe Flacco over a couple times. I believe they sacked Lamar Jackson 7 times. So nice upside there. So a couple defensive streamers for you: the Bills versus the Saints, Chargers at the Giants, or the Lions versus the Bears.
And there you have it. Anything else here heading into week 4 before we get out?
Now, just try to stay ahead of things. Make sure you set your lineups. Make sure you follow the injury reports. You know, when somebody else is going to be out, especially some of these offensive linemen, sometimes it makes a difference. So just get ready. The bye weeks are coming. If you're 3-0, don't get too high on yourself. If you're 0-3, it's not full panic mode, but you really need to get to 1-3. 0-4 is a rough one. I believe the worst I've ever made it back from was 1-5 to make the fantasy playoffs, but because of the short season, generally only 13 or 14 weeks, you really got to start going for it sooner than you think. So if you're 1-2, don't worry about it. If you are 0-3, it's not quite must-win week, but it's pretty close.
Thank you guys for checking out another episode of Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. We appreciate you guys. Hopefully this helped you out. Don't you worry, we'll be here each and every week. In order to make sure you don't miss one of our episodes, go ahead and throw the thumb and subscribe. That way it shows up in your feed. We definitely appreciate you guys. Wouldn't be here without you. And let us know how you're approaching this week, man. If you got any updates, got any players you're targeting, let us know. Drop a comment below or hit us up on social media.
Yeah, and if you're going to bid, 99% of your fab on Trey Benson, picks in the comments, or it didn't happen. Thanks again for checking out this episode of Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. You can find our content wherever you get your pods and on YouTube, on social media at Seize the Gap FF, and on the web at seizethegapff.com. Try to keep it nice and easy to remember, just like the flaps, FLAPS. Very important to our success. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please hit that thumb. I'm Magnum Mills. He's Jamie G. Thanks again for checking out the show, and please remember to seize the gap and stop being so inefficient.
And we don't care if you're old, you need to seize the gap.